All right. These are some of the smart people I work with. If you are ever in the Bay Area, please feel free to invite yourself over. I'm going to try to I know it's been a scary morning. I've been scared a little bit. I'm going to try to put a little bit of optimism in here, talk about some of the issues we've been discussing, and say that small companies and large companies recognize the issues. The answers are out there. They're really out there, and all we do is have to either have the economic decision, the cost, willing to pay maybe a little more, or the political will, and we can make these things happen, all right? So a little bit of optimism before lunch. The way I figured I can speak for an hour and a half, right? We are an adjunct to UC Berkeley. That is our building. We have about 400 people there, and about 50 of them are working on bioproducts, and many of them are working on the things we just talked about, including replacing triclosans, suitable packaging, and again, smart people. This is the view from UC Berkeley, and we are the adjunct down the hill. All right, if you're within an hour, just drop off and say hello. All right, the other thing is we tend to work with companies. A lot of the companies are companies that are really trying to answer the same questions that we've been addressing this morning, big and small. Now, the reason I put Xerox into my introduction is I really am old. In the 80s, Xerox wanted to make biodegradable plastics and toners. They recognized, in the 80s, they recognized that we could think these coatings and plastics were bad for you, and my PhD program was to replace plastics with bacterially produced biodegradable sustainable plastics. All right? They know it. The price was a little higher. The drive wasn't there. And so some of this technology has been sitting around for a while. All right. Oh, those are a lot of the companies we work with. I mentioned Method and a few companies like that because be on the lookout for B Corps, public benefit corporations. They do not have to always maximize profit. They have to maximize stakeholder public good. All right, that matters. So if you can recognize those folks, they sometimes make interesting decisions with their sustainability questions. And then there are some smaller companies we work with. We literally get in the weeds with the companies. We invite them to come work with us. They are actually in our labs working closely with us. And at any given time, we have 10 to 15 companies running around our building. And if you see yourself in one of these pictures, let us know and invite yourself over. Some of this is unintended consequences. Some of this is be careful what the drivers are, or maybe notice what the drivers are. When I first got into the business, the whole reason to make a biodegradable plastic was going to be to reduce trash. All right? We had a litter issue. We also had a surplus wheat. Get to that in a second. Then there's biodegradation and compostability, not necessarily one and the same, legally different. Biodegradable goes by an ASTM standard, D6400. I was on the D6400 committee, good for frequent flyer miles. The other driver is sustainability, not the same as degradable, compostable. It's what's the best use of carbons. Greenhouse gas reduction. Going to talk, so each of these, this is my introduction. I'll have one quick example and then move on. Some of it is just strategic or to meet regulations. And then finally, and we hope to aim for it, is just make the best product. If you can maybe make the best product, you don't have to have all those other drivers. We use pieces of paper with not worrying about the greenhouse gas reduction or this, that. We do it because we like writing on it, and it hits a price point we can tolerate. And so the best reason to use something, so consumers like plastic bags, this is the counter, because they're really light and they're really flexible and we're addicted to cheap petroleum, all right? We like using plastic bags. So if we're going to replace the plastic bag, replace it with something that consumers will buy and it's nice. All right, here we go. First reason to get into it, some of you folks who are not so young will remember that we had a litter issue. It was on the cover of Time and Newsweek, and they were driving garbage up and down. Couldn't land it from Long Island because we were going to have a litter issue. And it actually drove a lot of our research. We also had a surplus in wheat. So in 1997, the whole reason we made a plastic, Greg Glenn and I made a plastic with a company called Urshel, was to use up our excess wheat. They were plowing under 18% of our wheat crop those years. And we made these little fiber plates. And here's how we made them. We had a glorified waffle maker, and we take starch and fiber, and we worked with this company really closely. Urshel, it was called. They moved into our pilot plant. They made plates and bowls, and they made those McDonald's clamshells. You put in starch and fiber, into our little mold. You close the mold, and it's a waffle maker. They're still for sale. They went to McDonald's and were introduced, and at about 600 franchises, they were really, really compostable. McDonald's had the idea that everything that would come to McDonald's would be compostable. Everything, everything. Forks, knives, cups, plates. These couldn't be microwaved. So McDonald's, they couldn't be heated very well, and when you took your burger home, in your burger box, the starch kind of, I mean, they were probably more nutritious than some of the stuff that they, never mind. Starch and fiber. If you see them, think of Greg Glenn, my friend. He was the final formulator of Earthshell. They are still sold as plates and bowls, Earthshell compostables. More recently, adding value to agricultural products has been one reason, and making, let me put that fork and knife. So this is a company called World Centric. They're in our pilot plant. They're kind of fun. When they showed up, they wanted to make plates out of wheat straw. That's nice. They wanted to make forks and knives and single-use items out of polylactic acid, PLA. Now, PLA, I know a lot of you folks think, okay, that's the thing that's supposed to be compostable, and maybe is compostable, but if I put it in my backyard compostable, it might not be compostable. And it's all about the fact that PLA is made by Cargill, and if you want to make it heat stable, the more stable you make your fork and knife, the less compostable it is. All right, so they're going in two directions. It's the one big success story in the degradables. I use it slightly loose. We'll talk about marine degradable in a second. When they showed up with us, if you put that fork in boiling water, that's the top fork, it's not good to be eating soup and have your soup spoon melt in your soup. Literally, if you put it in boiling water, the PLA will melt and degrade. And we've been working very, very closely with the industry to make sure that PLA is something that the consumers will like, they'll buy, and will degrade in at least an industrial compost facility. Okay, so that's what we've been working on. Been fortunate then. All right, this is the story. It's from corn. All right, this is why we can justify working on it. Anybody who wants to learn more about PLA can look at this slide. We've been working with two companies, Lapal and Grow Plastics, that really are starting to get an idea of how to make PLA useful to the industry. All right? Anybody know about the Sunship bag? The first degradable packaging. It was going to be highly compostable. Failed instantly. PepsiCo was behind this because of noise. Who knew, right? So we've been working on additives that are less noisy. And then this is a product of Washington State, a company called Grow Plastics, has finally, after years and years, this is 20 years in this. I know where the bodies are, right? 20 years later, they finally made, and the founder, CEO is Mike Wagner right over here from the state of Washington. We induced him because of really cheap rent, almost free, to come down and use our pilot plant, so he's been working with us closely. He's found a way to make PLA expanded plastics that are both heat tolerant, so you can probably put them in the microwave and they'll last. He'll tell you can put them compostable, grease resistant, okay, and lightweight, so you use less material. Now, here's something, we can make them marine degradable. The key to making something like that marine degradable is to actually, all right, without giving a trade secret away, is a study we did about 20 years ago. These big companies know how to do it, and you have to have a little nitrogen in it. So if you want to make something, all right, soil, you put it in compost, has nitrogen. In the ocean, pieces of plastic don't have enough nitrogen. They're hunks of mostly carbon. And so if the bacteria land on them, they have nothing to get them started. Crab shells, clam shells are exactly the same constituents as cellulose, except they have an amido group. They have a nitrogen in the polymer chain. And so all we have to do to make it marine degradable is add some sources of nitrogen. All right, did I just give away a trade secret, Mike? Don't worry about it. So it can be done. All right, moving on. Where are we on this talk? Sometimes it's just fun to make a plastic that, well, let's get back to this. Recycling is a real big issue. So you have a big problem whether it should be compostable or recyclable. All right, a lot of you folks, we can wrestle with that for hours. This U.S. government has tried to push a program on what sustainable plastics are. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There is a program called Bioproducts. If something is mostly a bioproduct, we nudge the industry into putting it. This is just a plug for the USDA Biopreferred program. Not that I completely agree with all parts of it. But basically, if you are, there's only 3 advantages you can get in the federal government to get a contract. Minority owned, small business, or if you are selling a biopreferred product. So something called a biopreferred product. Originally, I was an idealist 20 years ago when they first introduced that, and I thought biopreferred meant it would be a bioproduct, 100% true and blue sustainable. All right. So this kind of describes the program. If you are a biopreferred, you get to put this label on it, which says the federal government, USDA, says it's a good bioproduct, and it has certain attributes. The attributes does not necessarily mean it's compostable. It just means it's been manufactured marginally green, and it has a certain amount of bioproduct or new carbons in it. Here's what's interesting. A company you may have heard of, Coca-Cola, showed up on the green product, and they said, we are trying desperately to make a 100% green Coke bottle. 100% green. It has to be 100% PET. And we said, power to you. So polyethylene terephthalate, we just heard terephthalates are nasty. Coca-Cola is going to make one that's completely green. All right. After 10 years of trying, Coca-Cola made one that's 30% green. So if you look at the green bottle, all right, the PET, polyethylene terephthalate, the E is ethylene glycol from ethanol. That's green. The T, terephthalate, is not green, and that's also the nasty chemical. Coca-Cola sells a lot of Coke bottles. So they talked to their folks down in Washington and said, we sell a lot of Coke bottles. We like the biopreferred label. We want to put it on there. Can we put it on there? And after years of wrestling with it, it is a green product, biopreferred. So notice that the biopreferred and bioproducts just means you have to have 30% green product because our friends at Coca-Cola said so. All right. And then this is kind of an interesting thing. Kevin Holtman is in that picture, and he was hired 12 years ago to turn rice straw into ethanol. And he did just about everything but turn rice straw into ethanol. What he did is he started working with landfill operators and composters and say, what are the real issues with plastics and with everything? Also, what is the most consistent source of carbon in any community? And it's not from rice straw and wheat straw and other things which are seasonal. It's garbage. Every day we make 4 pounds of garbage, plus or minus, every day. What's the best? That's the best source of carbon if I'm going to make ethanol. Actually, am I really going to make ethanol? Maybe I should make methane or lactic acid or something better than ethanol that doesn't give out CO2s. All right, so that was a project. He actually got people, we got people involved, including the city of Salinas, and we went to scale with this. So this is a group, CR cubed, that cooks garbage. Autoclaves garbage similar to the way we cook medical waste. And they said there are certain advantages to steam treating garbage every day, similar to medical waste for all your garbage, especially if your tipping fees are above $25 a ton, because the energy costs are about $20 a ton. So let's talk about this. So here's a big autoclave that would usually be used for medical waste. They put it in the city of Salinas in that building. Usually works in pairs. There's an autoclave. There's curbside MSW, not pre-sorted. Notice bags haven't been opened, they haven't been through a MRF. All right, garbage going in. And now why would we do this? Eventually you're saying, why are we doing this, right? I'll get to that in a second. So you put the garbage into this big cement mixer. 20 minutes later, at about 120 Celsius, it looks like that. Notice the plastic bags have all gone away. They've turned into little beads that can be floated off. The cellulose, now we think we're really good at recycling paper. We think we're really good at recycling bottles. We're barely at 25% in recycling PET plastic bottles. We're not much better on glass. We're a little better on glass. Very good at cans because we get a good return on those. Those little plastic beads, though, could be floated off. And that stuff in there ends up being 65% cellulose. There's your most cost effective. If you're willing to pay $22 a ton to cook your garbage, that's one of your best sources of carbons, either for making ethanol or making recycled paper. And we came to University of Washington and we made hand sheets out of that, and people can dry their hands with truly, and you can actually go and get this straight from the landfill. All right? So you can collect. Now, how do you do that? You start to put it through these size sieving drums. So just by size sieving. And if you take the 3/8 inch, really it's a 1 centimeter screen, if you take the plus minus from the 1 centimeter screen, which ends up being 60% of your cooked garbage, it ends up being 85% cellulose. You can make hand sheets. You can make ethanol. You can make compost out of that if you're willing to give it a go, and you can digest it. The other thing about this is what comes out the ends are bottles and cans that have not been picked out. So just through the size screening, you can get bottles and cans further recycled, so you don't have to pay somebody at a MRF table to pick your bottles and cans out of your garbage. And it can go to composting. And when you have a hammer, this is about 10 years ago, we started working with Coca-Cola. What would happen to the plastics that you get out of your cooked garbage? And so they set up a study. For about 6 weeks, we did nothing but, well, we had students grabbing PET bottles out of that cooked garbage. That's fun. We had students picking PET bottles out of original garbage to compare. And we looked at whether we were recycling or downcycling by cooking garbage at 120. And the answer, we were not really recycling. You could never get the clarity of PET or some of these other bottles. We would fill the entire tank with Coke bottles, new, virgin, used, whatever. Got a little study going with it. All right, and there's the results of that if anybody wants to talk about it. So if you're going to recycle, this is not a bad way to do it. You don't necessarily have to pay someone $7 an hour to pull cans and bottles off a MRF table. You don't have to. This is one way to do it. We also set up a digester at that. City of Salina is just kind of crazy. They decided they were never going to build another landfill, and they were going to get 95% diversion. So they're willing to try anything. So Patrick Matthews handed to him, this is a vision from 15 years ago. I'm never going to build another landfill. He runs the Salinas Valley Solid Waste Management Board. He's going to either digest it or recycle it or divert it or turn it into electricity. Very cool guy. So there's our size screen sieving. And right outside the building, we made a swimming pool that's a digester that we can either go anaerobic digestion to methane if we want, lactic acid if we want, propionic acid if we want. We've done them all, sometimes intentionally. All right, so never mind. A digester that goes bad smells like a barnyard. We've done that once. All right. Then the final thing, notice we'll be able to produce methane off that. Sugar prices, food prices always track with the oil industry. After fracking, methane does not. Methane is a greenhouse gas 25 times worse than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. It comes off your landfills and wastewater. Anytime somebody's flaring, they're wasting methane. And they're putting up a greenhouse gas, if they're not flaring, that's 25 times worse than CO2. All right? All of a sudden, methane no longer tracks with petroleum prices because of fracking, either as a natural gas or methane. And so we got together with a company called, let me put all of these out. Mango Materials came to us with a small miracle. We have bacteria that turn methane into plastic, biodegradable plastic, called PHA. Now, we're not turning your food into it. We're turning waste methane into plastics. I thought it was a small miracle. So its main carbon source, you take this soil, it used to be a soil bacteria, you just feed it methane under slight pressure, and it produces that plastic. And that's a really cool plastic. Every company in the world, plastics company in the world, has noticed this thing, PHA. No one's made money quite yet. And what it is if the way on the left there, if the bacteria has everything they need, they're just happy bacteria and they don't produce plastic. If you limit something important like magnesium or manganese, they start taking all the excess carbon and make a polyester. That's a really cool polyester that's got properties similar to polypropylene. And that's what this graph says. So now I'm going to tell you all the companies that have tried to make money off that. All right? ICI, Zeneca, Shell, ADM, BP. The problem is that they always tried to make money off of what I just said using food sources, sugars or cellulose as their carbon source. Mango's kind of unique because they're using waste methane, and the price is going to be 1/5 the price of food sources. Okay. Yeah, I can talk for another hour, right? I'll do this in 1 minute. One of the best reasons, though, to produce something, and we saw, we hope that Mike Wagner goes to scale on his, is it maybe produces the best product. This is just something, if you think about rubber tires, Rubber tires are kind of nasty. There's a lot of more studies, listen closely, people living near highways are not doing as well as you want to. They're getting respiratory illnesses and problems because of that black crud that comes off highways. Tires is probably the main reason for that. So we've been working with companies, and we've been working with companies for about 15 years to make domestic source of rubber, that would be strategic, and a clean source of natural rubber that wouldn't necessarily be filled with petroleum-based carbon black. Carbon black is either from coal or petroleum industries. It's 25% of your tire. So those little black beads that are coming off the highway are big part carbon black that are getting into your lungs and other things and ailments. So at minimum, it'd be nice to make that come from agricultural biomass. All right, get your carbon black at least from an American farmer, not necessarily from petroleum. The other reason is jet tires cannot be made by anything but natural rubber. Natural rubber is now made, usually it's produced by rubber trees that are from Southeast Asia, not necessarily countries that are our friends. And what's happening is those folks are displacing the rubber plantations with palm oil because of the biodiesel push. So we got rubber plantations switching over to palm oil at the same time that most countries like India and China are switching from bicycles to cars and need more tires. So we're trying to produce our own rubber supply, make it all natural. So another driver is just make a better project, make it domestically grown. Okay, and there's Colleen McMahon, and a rock star. She has been working with Cooper and Bridgestone in our labs to make an all-domestic, all-natural tire, to be continued. All right. All right. A big part of what I suggest is we've heard, the dire news, is when you think about solution, think about unintended consequences. Know what the problem is, define what you want the outcome to be. You can have unintended consequences. I talked about 5 or 6 different drivers towards why you produce a product. The cheapest is the way most consumers think about it, but you have a chance to actually talk to the regulators and get things in place, make it easier for the composters if that's a good thing to do, all right? So your output will depend on the strategies and the questions you ask, and especially if there's regulation involved, like the BioPreferred. Is that a successful program because Coke is selling a bottle that's 30% slightly greener? Yeah, I guess. And then just my little moment of optimism before lunch. The answers are out there. Anticipate unexpected consequences, but they're out there. The companies, Xerox was working on biodegradable plastics in 1988. They worked with Procter & Gamble and Body Shop, and literally you could buy shampoo bottles that were from that same plastic I just talked about throughout the 90s, and the market just wasn't ready for it. So we've got to hope they're ready for it now, all right? There's my thank yous. There's a senior scientist in our group, Biofuels, Bioproducts, player to be named later. We have an opening if we're ever allowed to hire again after this administration, and with that, that's me. There's our mission statement in a picture. All right, thank you.
What about the use of mushroom fibers? The root mushrooms being used for the clam shells.
Yeah.
What innovative I think it is.
Yep. So our group works with them. We have samples. Mainly the group in Texas using cotton lintners as the source. So if you haven't heard about it, and it's chitosan is the plastic. So basically, mushrooms are basically made out of chitosan, chitin, which is the same thing as clam shells, which is got the nitrogen in there, highly degradable. They're a little slow to grow. So what they're hoping to do, so you basically grow a mushroom the shape of your clamshell. What they're hoping to do is actually get it into little beads and then be able to press them into a shape. We want them to succeed. Really cool. Yeah, mushroom beads and then form them. Then it'd be more like styrofoam beads without it being styrofoam. Mushroom beads. I'm good. All right.
You mentioned something about the fracking and methane correlation. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Okay. So when you frack, you put, they're called oil muds. You put more liquid down into the ground, and you fill up the gaps. There's sometimes gels. And as you do that, you push out natural gas methane. So as you do that, a lot of methane's coming up with your fracked oil. really cheap oils coming out. We're getting better and then at the same time, we're getting better at mandating that landfills and dairies use digesters and collect their methane. So for the last 5 years, methane is really, really cheap. Either through fracking, now it's natural gas, it wouldn't be natural. It would be still a fossil fuel, but it makes the price of methane really, really inexpensive, and it means that landfills can give it to you practically for free. So Mango Materials could put themselves on the side of a landfill and have free carbons.